I'm going to be totally honest with you. I'm a planner. I like to prepare everything. And for some reason, anytime I'm asked to public speak, God doesn't let me prepare. I try, I get angry. I have like a whole process where I'm like, let me write down what I'm going to say and time it so I'm in the 10 minutes. And he doesn't let me. So I just felt like I need to tell you that. I'll just share, and hopefully it will be 10 minutes, and hopefully it will make sense. I'm going to start at the end of my story. So my name's Naomi, and I am a grief recovery method specialist. Now, 3 years ago, I didn't even know what that was, or that I had any need for grief recovery at all. So what sent me into this whole world of grief recovery was almost 3 years ago now. It was in the first COVID lockdown. I own a small business. I was working 4 times the amount I usually work, which if you know anything about small business, that's already full time times 2. So working tons, exhausted, and just to keep my business alive during the lockdowns. And so I had gone to visit my brother in Toronto just for like a little getaway I need space, I need to breathe. So I was there, and the phone rang on my 3rd day of vacation, and the person on the other end said, "Are you sitting down?" And they told me that my best friend had died that day by suicide. I immediately started throwing things back in my suitcase. I'm like, cut the vacation short, I'm coming back to Ottawa right now. And then I couldn't go because I started throwing up. And I had never had that reaction to anything in my whole life. And I threw up that whole night. I didn't get back to Ottawa till the next day. And I didn't even cry. It was too terrible for tears, and my body just took over. And that scared me because, as I said, I like to be in control and I like to be organized. And I felt completely out of control. And so I had myself in therapy within the week. I was like, all right, let's get her done, fix me. I can't function. I don't know what to do. And the therapy helped like a little tiny bit. Thankfully, I knew God and he brought me comfort, but I had this missing piece in my life, which I knew I needed to grieve, but I realized I didn't know how. And I thought it was because I had never encountered anything that needed grief like this before. I was like, well, this is my first like real my grandparents had passed away, but they were old and it was time and, it was sad, but it wasn't like this, right? So this just kind of sent me on a journey. I started reading books on grief and like talking to people about grief. And a pastor friend of mine handed me this book called The Grief Recovery Method. And he said, here, read this. This is the only thing I have found that's actually helpful. He was right. So I started reading it, and it opened my mind to just this whole world of grief. And there's so many things, they call them grief myths, things that as a society we're conditioned to think about grief, and it's wrong. So there's things we tell each other, like don't feel bad, which makes no sense because you can't not feel how you feel. So when you tell someone, hey, don't feel bad about that, basically you're telling them don't feel how you feel, which you can't possibly do, and then that's just frustrating. So that's one, don't feel bad, not helpful. Time will heal. Time doesn't heal, time festers. You have to actually do something to get healing. We say things like, keep busy. That just distracts you. You may feel better in the busyness, but the minute the busyness stops, the pain is still there. There's so many of these things we say to each other. Oh, be strong. Sometimes we say, be strong, like you gotta be strong for others. So we'll pull ourselves together, and sometimes we'll even tell that to ourselves. We'll say it in a form of, well, someone else has it worse, which basically means I should be okay because they've had it worse. Does that fix you? No. So I started reading aloud pages of this book to my roommates. I was like, listen to this. This is so good. I may have forced one of my roommates to do the entire book and course with me. So working through this, it showed all these wrong ideas we have about grief. And then it showed right ways to handle grief. It talked about emotions. We tend to classify emotions as good emotions and bad emotions. We all want to feel happy. We want to be excited. We want to have peace and be comforted. These are things that we, that's the good emotion. That's the one we want. And then there's anger and frustration and nervousness and sadness, and we don't want those. Those are wrong, right? So, but if something sad happens and you feel sad, is that not the correct emotion? Is that not the good emotion for that situation? So my mind was just blown, and then it takes you through these steps, and I like busy work, so I was like working through it, and I called my friend. I said, thank you so much for that book, that was so good. And he goes, there's these courses you can take and get certified to help people. And I was like, that's not for me. I just did this for myself. And he said, well, if you want to do it, let me know, and I'll help pay for that, because I think you'd be good at it. And I was like, thank you, I have a job. It's full time, remember? Anyhow, I couldn't shake it, because once my eyes were open to grief, I started seeing it everywhere. And here's the thing, not only in other people, but in my whole life before this event happened, that shook me. Because what I didn't realize is most of us think about grief in terms of death and divorce. Somebody actually just said to me this week, oh, so you do like grief recovery, so like you just work with people who's had people die. And I was like, funny, that's what I thought too. So there are over 40 loss events that we endure. So even just for me in my life, as I said, when I was young, my grandparents died, but it was like, they're old, it was their time. That doesn't mean grief. But there's grief there, but we don't recognize it. It's like when you're born, you get a backpack, and every time there's a loss that we don't deal with, it's like you put it in your backpack. And we're all walking around with these accumulated losses. Some of us have boulders back there, or some of us just have so many little ones, they pile up till it's affecting your life and your ability, your capacity to be free, to live your fullest self. And so I began to think back over my life, and I actually ended up using this grief recovery method on all these different losses in my life. Relationships, the person hadn't died, but you're just estranged, or it turned sour, or something didn't work out. My family moved a lot when I was younger, and it was like, oh, well, it's a better house, it's a better job for dad, like this is a good move, right? But there's still a loss there. As I got older, the losses got bigger, right? I was part of a group, there was all these lies circulating about me, and the whole thing shut down. But I was like, I'm organized, I'm positive, I move on. I landed my dream job in the States. I got to live there for 5 years, working this amazing job, and then work visa problems. And I ended up back in Canada, not just back in Canada, but on a short trip that I was supposed to go back to the States on. So my house, my car, my job, and my clothes were all still in America, and I couldn't go back. I lost everything. Fast forward a couple years, I started having unexplainable health problems. At the lowest point, I was actually bedridden. I had vertigo, so I couldn't drive. I had Bell's palsy, so half my face went paralyzed. I couldn't keep food down, and I kept throwing up, and the skin was peeling off my hands and my legs from rashes, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with me. But that's not grief. That's just a hardship that I overcame, right? But as I'm looking back, all of these things, it's loss, and we're all walking around holding it. And because I had given my life to God, there's a lot of expressions people use for giving your life to the Lord. They'll say, I was born again, I became a Christian, or like prayed the sinner's prayer, asked Jesus in my heart. I like to use the words, I surrendered my life to God. Because I found someone that was all-knowing, all-powerful, held all wisdom. And not only that, he created me, and he has the ability to save me from my own darkness. And so I chose as a teenager, okay, not my will. I'm going to give my life to you, and I'm going to live your way, because your way's better. And that brought me so much peace. But at the same time, I was missing a piece. And the piece I was missing was being able to acknowledge and process through the hard things of life. So this has brought me here. Some days I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing, but walking forward with the strength and the energy and courage that God provides, and facing up to the hard things of life, allowing myself to feel, and hopefully being able to help others to do the same. Thank you so much.